Today I interview Madeline Cohen, Assistant Director and Associate Professor in the University Libraries at the Westminster Law Library at the University of Denver Sturm College of Law. Madeline, I'd like to begin by asking you to tell us about yourself as a person, including where you were raised and about your life both when you were young and today.
Okay, well thank you for having me today. And I was born in New York and raised mostly on the East Coast, but we moved around a lot when I was growing up. My father was in publishing, and so we moved around quite a bit. I lived in Colorado and in Michigan, and then went to school at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And then now I'm in Denver. I've been there since 1995. And I have a daughter also who is 13, starting high school in the fall.
Fun age.
Yes.
In order to complete a picture of you as a person, can I ask if you have any hobbies, activities, or other special interests?
Well, I do. I mean, obviously with a 13-year-old, she keeps me pretty busy, so she is my primary interest at the moment. But I also really like to cook and bake. And as a matter of fact, it's one of those things that really relaxes me when I'm feeling stressed out. And so when I went to law school, I signed up for cooking classes. I went to law school at night and worked during the day at University of Denver. And so whenever I could get away, I would go to the local cooking school and take cooking classes. So I learned how to make pastries and knife skills, and it actually really helped me get through law school.
That's pretty amazing.
So, right, so that's my main hobby. And so everybody benefits from it because, you know, my dad and my daughter like it when I get stressed out and cook and bake, so.
You earned your bachelor's and master's degrees from the University of Wisconsin and your JD from the University of Denver. What brought you to each of those universities, and did you learn any lasting lessons at either that you would like to share?
So I ended up at the University of Wisconsin, recruited on the gymnastics team there. So I had been a competitive gymnast from the age of 6. And so I was recruited on the team there, and that was basically why I ended up going. I went the summer before my freshman year to start working out with the team. And then I actually ended up staying in Madison, which a lot of people do. It's a great town. So I ended up getting my library degree from there and worked there for a number of years before moving back out to Denver. And I worked as a librarian for a long time before I went back to law school. I'd always wanted to go to law school, and just life got in the way, and I was never able to sort of make it work. And actually am a 2-time cancer survivor. And so around that time, I was diagnosed with bone cancer. And so it sort of made me reevaluate what I wanted to do. And I decided at that point, if I'm ever going to go to law school, now's the time. And so I did. I applied to DU, and I started going at night. And that's when I started working at DU during the day as a reference librarian, and then part-time in tech services. And I went to DU mostly because I was there in Denver and because they had a great evening program, and I was really interested in their clinical program as well. And so that's what brought me there.
That's great. So I'm going to take a step back before we move deep into librarianship.
Yeah.
So how long did you stay in competitive gymnastics?
So I started when I was 6, and then I ended up through my junior year in college when my body just was like, enough. Right, so it kind of gave out on me, but I had all of those years as a competitive gymnast. I used to leave school early. In high school, I would take all of my classes in the morning and then leave school at 1 and go to the gym. So I was in the gym probably 30 plus hours a week, plus weekends.
Teaches you a tremendous amount of discipline, doesn't
it? It does. Time management as well.
So you mentioned a little bit about what led you into librarianship and law librarianship, but can you explore that a little further, and more specifically, obviously there were the health and personal reasons. Mm-hmm. Were there any particular mentors or other people that also influenced your decision?
So interestingly, my mother was a librarian and my father was in publishing. So I always joke with people I was either destined or doomed to get into librarianship. And so I would say my mentors have been anybody who has given me a shot along the way. I sort of feel that way because, I mean, I've had a lot of experiences where I haven't quite had, you know, the background to apply for this particular job, but someone took an interest in me, someone really wanted to take a chance on me, And so I feel like those are the people who were really my mentors. They took a chance, they kind of brought me along. But I guess my original mentors were probably my parents. I think I went to my first AALL when I was maybe 4 or 5. And I just
That's
I would
pretty
go,
remarkable.
I know. and for a while when I first got into the profession, there were people who had known my dad as a legal vendor and knew me as, you know, a 6 or 7-year-old, and they just couldn't quite get it into their head that I'm now a professional law librarian. They're like, wait a minute, are you still 8 years old? Yeah, so I would say that's sort of how I got into the profession. It was something that I had seen growing up. It was something that I always loved. And felt at home with, and I think it was just a natural progression. I did other things along the way, but I always sort of came back to librarianship.
And since you've mentioned both of your parents, do you want to give us a little bit about their names and their backgrounds for those who might not realize?
Right. So my mom, Beatrice Cohen, she actually passed away about 8 years ago, but she was a teacher and mostly an elementary and high school librarian. My father, Herbert Cohen, worked for a number of publishing companies, both traditional and then law. He worked, before he retired, with IHS in Colorado and also IMI. They did, he was part of the microfiche production of the original Congressional Record. So he was really involved at the beginning. That's how I know Dick Spinelli, actually.
Everyone knows Dick, I think.
Right. But he knew my father knew Mr. Rothman, and so, you know, that's sort of, there are a number of people who are still in the business who probably remember my father. He's still alive. He actually lives in Denver with us, and he was very excited that I was coming here.
So tell us about your first job.
My first law librarian job was at the University of Denver. So I had been a public librarian for many years before going back to law school. And so DU gave me a shot, basically. I walked in, I remember walking in maybe the second or third day of law school, needing a job during the day, because my job at the public library the hours were very weird. You know, I worked evening hours and weekend hours, and it just wasn't conducive to going to law school. So I walked in and spoke with the access services manager at the time, and it was funny because he said, you know, do you have any library experience? You know, would you be able to do this job? And so I handed him my resume, and he was just like, oh, sure, I'm sure we can find you something to do. And he's still a really good friend of mine to this day, and I always tease him about that story. And so they basically found stuff for me to do. I worked a little circ. I shadowed with Al Dong when he was at the University of Denver on the reference desk. And then eventually they had me working tech services, so I was kind of a jack of all trades. And it was great because I got a lot of experience that you know, new law librarians might not be able to get. You know, I wasn't sort of pigeonholed in one place.
And you didn't have to ask for that. They just gave it.
They just gave it to me. It was. I really feel lucky that was able to have that experience early on in my career.
So what took you from that position to the National Conference of State Legislatures?
Well, so right after law school, I had my daughter, and I stayed at home with her for about 1.5 years. And then I started thinking that I wanted to go back to work. And I'd worked in policy when I was at the University of Wisconsin. So while I was in grad school, I worked as a speechwriter and a researcher for a state legislator there. And I'd always really had this interest in policy and politics. I ran a bunch of campaigns when I was in Wisconsin too. And so I had a friend who told me about a policy analyst job at the National Conference of State Legislatures. It was a part-time job, which was sort of what I was looking for. And she thought I'd be great because I had all this research background. And so that was how I got there. It was a fabulous job. I really enjoyed it. And it turned in from a part-time job into a full-time job, and I was there for a number of years.
And then you went to the 10th Circuit,
Mm-hmm.
where you started as a reference librarian, but ended up running the library as director and circuit
Right.
court librarian for a decade. What prompted the decision to move to a court library, and can you tell about the evolution of your position while there?
Sure. So while I was at NCSL, I knew that I wanted to eventually get back into libraries. So one of the things about Denver, it's a wonderful place to live, but it's also sort of a small market in terms of librarianship and law librarianship in particular. And so the jobs don't come around all that often. And so I had a friend who was working with me who had been working with me at DU, and she had gone on to a law firm, but she had seen the posting for the 10th Circuit and told me about it. I think it was the last day it was open, and I applied for it and I got it. So, you know, I mean, when I mentioned to you before that I feel like my mentors are the people who have given me chances, I've sort of found myself in these situations where, you know, like, okay, I'll just apply for it, or that's great, I'll try it. And so that's how I ended up at the 10th Circuit. And I'd never worked in the court before. It was a very different environment. You know, it was kind of a learning curve in terms of learning about how the federal judiciary worked, and just in terms of the different units and working with judges. It was a great experience. And then I was given the opportunity, again, to apply for the directorship position when the previous director retired.
And how large was the system at that? How many people were you supervising?
So at one point, we had about 20 people working, so about half in Denver, and then the other half spread out throughout the 6 states in the circuit. So there was a headquarters library in Denver, and then satellite libraries around the circuit.
Did you have to travel to all of them?
I
or
did.
You
I did, yeah. And you know, one of the biggest challenges, I know there is a session at AALL this year about managing remotely, and it is probably one of the most challenging parts of that job, was to make sure that everybody felt like they were part of the mission of the library and having that interaction. And technology makes it easier, but it's still a very challenging aspect of that job.
Absolutely. While you were at the 10th Circuit, you planned and coordinated the Federal Court Library Conference. What gave you this idea, and what benefits did you hope would come from that effort?
So that was a really great opportunity that presented itself to us. There were a few circuit librarians who were sort of frustrated at the fact that because of certain judicial conference rules, it was getting harder and harder for us to travel to conferences, and to really felt like we were missing out on the continuing education that's so important for law librarians. And we thought, you know, maybe we could do something that's really specific to court librarians and bring people in. And we know we have a ton of talent in the judiciary, so certainly we could get people to speak. And so it was kind of, we sort of felt like it was this cockamamie idea. But we were really interested in it. So we planned it out over the course of maybe a year, 18 months, and we started contacting folks within the judiciary and outside the judiciary. We had judges come and speak. We had people from the administrative office speak, and we had our own staffs speak. And it ended up being a really successful conference. And we were able to convince the chief judges in the circuits and also in the districts to let their staff come, to let the library staff come, because it was sort of a homegrown experience. And so we had really great attendance. And they're having the second one this year, actually, in DC in, I think, the beginning of August.
Nice.
So it's continuing. This is their sophomore effort, and I'm hoping I've passed the torch on. And I'm excited to hear how it goes.
That's fantastic. You've now made a full circle, returning to the location of your first law library position, where you are now Associate Director and Associate Professor of University Libraries. What brought you back to academia, and what do you bring with you from your other jobs that you think will serve academia well?
So I've been wanting to get back into academia for a long time. It was a place where I felt really comfortable. I really valued my experiences that I had at DU. I felt a connection to it because I had graduated from there, from law school, and there was that desire to want to give back to the school. And knowing that I wanted to stay in Denver, my daughter's starting high school, and you know, I wanted to have that continuity for her. When the job opened up, I was like, this is the universe telling me that this is my time. And it really just, everything just sort of fell into alignment, and it worked out really well. I was very excited to be able to work with Catherine. I know she had been hired just the year before, and we have a new dean, and we're hiring some new folks now, and it just, I knew that the opportunity would present itself to kind of be able to make a difference in a place to sort of put our stamp on it. And it was just, everything sort of happened at the right time.
And because you've had such a diversity of experience that not everyone has, different types of libraries, like what do you think you bring from those libraries to academia that we could benefit from?
Well, I think it'll impact the library in different ways. So I think in my teaching, I will be able, even though I wasn't a litigator, I never worked as a litigator, I worked as a mediator for a while, and I worked in policy, and I've worked at the court, and so I think that in my classes I can reach those students who maybe don't want a traditional path in law school. I mean, I was one of those people, and I didn't necessarily have anybody to kind of lead me in that direction. I was older when I went to law school, so it wasn't a big deal, but if you're 21, 22, and you're not quite sure what you want to do, but you know you don't want to be a litigator, it's kind of nice to find someone who can say, well, look at all of these things that you can do with a law degree that don't involve working in a law firm. So I think I bring that, and just that kind of experience of being in different places, supervising different people, being supervised by different people. I think it just brings a more well-rounded view of everything that goes on administratively in a library.
Absolutely. What do you consider your greatest professional achievements up to this point in your career?
Well, that's an interesting question. I kind of hope that my greatest professional achievement is in front of me. I mean, I've been really grateful for all of the things that I've been able to do in my career, both as a sort of a straight-up librarian and a law librarian and a policy researcher, but I'm hoping that great things are in front of me.
Do you have any great ideas in mind or things that I have to ask? It's fine if the answer is no, but I have to ask.
I don't know. I don't have anything specifically in mind right now, but I'm just open to this new adventure in academia, and I'm really looking forward to what's to come.
Sounds great. Do you have any notable mentors? I know you've talked about your parents, but are there others probably within the library circle? And if so, can you give us your names, their names, and then any specific advice they might have given you that sticks to you to this day?
Yeah. I think, so along the way, I mean, I have to mention Ron Wheeler. I think that he and I have been friends for a while, and he's really gone to bat for me in a lot of ways, and he's encouraged me, and he was one of the people who was encouraging me to get back into academia, telling me that it wasn't a crazy idea to jump from the courts and back into academia. Someone will give you a job, and so I have to mention him. And I think when I first came to DU, the staff who was there in the library, I really considered all of them mentors. Al Dong and Patty Wellinger and Gary Alexander and Paul Sharp. They all just took me under their wing and were really patient with me and spent a lot of time. I mean, they're super busy, and they took time out of their schedules to make sure that I knew what I was doing, that I could be a contributing member of the team, and so they were really helpful to me.
In addition to all that you've done for the institutions at which you've worked, you've also taken the time to publish, serve on committees, speak at various conferences and meetings. Can I ask you to describe some of the most meaningful service opportunities that you've had, and why you consider that type of service to be important enough to spend time doing?
Sure. So I think what I really like about presenting and publishing is the ability to sort of share different kinds of experiences with people. So one of the things that I really like, and what I've had the opportunity to do in the past, is to teach legal research to non-law librarians. So I did a number of presentations when I was at the court on how to do legal research in the public library. So I would go to Colorado Association of Library conferences and do presentations on how to do legal research or how to use technology to do legal research. And because when I worked at the public library, I know that it was very difficult. We would get legal questions, and you're walking this fine line because you're not legally trained and you don't really know where to send people. So I felt, like that was a really good service to provide. And so those are the types of things that I really like to do, is connect what I do now to maybe what I used to do in the past, and to really connect those different groups together, because we really do have commonalities that we might not know about.
Absolutely. So we're nearing the conclusion of our conversation today, but before we end, is there anything that we have not discussed that you would like to bring up?
We've discussed a lot of things.
We have.
So I don't think so. I mean, I mentioned before that there are sort of these different things about my life. So the competitive gymnast, the cancer survivor, I'm a single mom. All of those things I think inform who I am and make me the kind of person that I am and help me grow in different directions than maybe I would have otherwise. And I sort of look at those things, even though some of them have been challenging, as opportunities to grow. And so I just want people to know that that about me, and when you look at other people, there are always those things that are within that person that make them who they are.
That's a lovely note to end on, and also a teaching lesson, I think, for other people to know that challenges are also opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
With that said, Madeline Cohen, I want to thank you for taking so much of your time today to talk with me on camera and for sharing so much about our profession and your service to it. In thanking you, I should note that I am doing so not only on my behalf, but also on behalf of Pat Kehoe, Frank Hudek, and Dick Spinelli, with whom I have the privilege of working to compile this oral history of law librarianship for the Spinelli's Law Library Reference Shelf portion on Hein Online. Thank you.
Thanks.